of. The Appalachian Highlands in November don't warn you. They simply close around you like a fist, and by the time you realize what's happening, the cold has already made its decision about whether you live or die. Of. Matthias Holt had learned that lesson the hard way, 14 years ago, when the mountain took everything from him except his solitude. He had kept the solitude like a man keeps a scar, not because he wanted it, but because it was the only thing left that proved he had survived. He was checking the last of his snare lines along Tanner's Creek when the sound reached him. Not an animal sound. Animals in distress make noise that fits the landscape. This sound was wrong. Too thin, too human, coming from the direction of the old logging road that hadn't seen a working truck in 6 years. Matthias stood still for a moment, the way men do when they are weighing instinct against inconvenience. Then he slung his pack over his shoulder and walked toward it. Of. She was wedged between the front axle of an overturned pickup and the frozen bank of the creek, half in the water and half out, her left arm pinned under the crumpled door panel. The truck had gone off the embankment nose first, and the way the ice had buckled beneath the driver's side wheel, it hadn't been going fast. It had simply slid, silently and without drama, the way disasters in the mountains usually happen. Matthias dropped to one knee in the snow beside her. She was conscious. That was the first thing. Her eyes were open, dark brown, wide with pain and something else he recognized from his own mirror. The particular look of someone who has been running and has just run out of road. "Don't move," he said, which was unnecessary given that the door panel had her arm locked flat against the gravel. "I wasn't planning on it," she said through clenched teeth. Her name, he would learn later, was Tatum Voss, 24 years old. Of. She had been driving since before dawn from Knoxville, on a road she didn't know, in a truck that wasn't registered in her name, carrying something strapped beneath her coat that she had not yet allowed herself to think about directly. The way you don't look at a wound until you absolutely have to. Of. Getting the door panel off her arm took Matthias 12 minutes, and a length of come-along chain he kept coiled behind the seat of his own truck. The arm wasn't broken, badly bruised, the skin already purpling from elbow to wrist. But the cold was the immediate problem. She had been in the water long enough. Of. Her lips had the bluish undertone he associated with bad outcomes. He didn't ask permission. There wasn't time for it. He lifted her out of the creek bed the same way he would lift a trapped animal. Carefully, with no wasted motion, keeping his weight low, and carried her up the embankment to his truck. She started. "Whatever's in the truck can wait," Matthias said. "It can't," she said, and the way she said it made him stop walking. He looked down at her. She was shivering so hard he could feel it through his forearms. But her jaw was set with a determination that had nothing to do with her current situation and everything to do with whatever she'd driven 4 hours through the mountains to get away from. "Then tell me what I'm looking for and I'll get it," he said. A pause. A calculation behind those dark eyes. "There's a satchel under the driver's seat, brown leather. Don't let it out of your sight." He didn't ask why. He set her down in the passenger seat of his truck, turned the heat on full, and went back down the embankment for the satchel. It was heavier than he expected. He didn't open it. He put it on the seat beside her and drove. His cabin was 3.5 miles up a fire road that wasn't on any public map. He had bought the property in 2009 for $11,000 cash from a timber company that had stripped it bare and moved on, and he had spent the years since growing it back. The pines, the creek buffer, the silence. He had a wood stove, a generator he used sparingly, a root cellar that kept him fed from October through April. He had not had a visitor in 14 months. He got the wood stove going first. Then he got her coat off. She let him, barely, watching his face the whole time with an expression he couldn't fully read, and wrapped her in the wool blanket he kept on the back of the couch for winters exactly like this one. That was when he saw it. Not immediately. First he saw that her flannel shirt was soaked through on the left side, and he started to peel it back to check for cuts at truck's interior, and she grabbed at his wrist. Hard, with her good arm. "Don't," she said. Matthias looked at her. "I need to check whether you're bleeding." "I'm not bleeding. You might not know." "I know." Her grip on his wrist tightened. "Please, just give me a minute." He sat back on his heels and looked at her. She was still shivering, but the color was coming back to her face from the stove's heat. She looked like someone in the act of making a decision that had already been made for her by circumstances she hadn't chosen. "I'm not going to hurt you," Matthias said. The words came out rougher than he intended. He was out of practice at reassuring people. "I don't know who you're running from or what you've got under that shirt, but I pulled you out of a frozen creek. I think you can trust me with whatever it is." Tatum looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the fire. "If you see it," she said quietly, "they'll come for you too." Matthias had been threatened before. He had been shot at before, once by a man who'd believed Matthias had seduced his wife. He hadn't, and once by a man who was simply drunk and pointing guns at things. Neither instance had particularly frightened him. What frightened him, in a way he hadn't felt in years, was the tone of her voice. She wasn't threatening him, she was warning him. The difference was enormous. "I've been up on this mountain for 14 years, Matthias said. "Whoever they are, they don't know I exist." "They'll figure it out," Tatum said. "When they find the truck." The truck went into a creek in a hollow that isn't visible from the road. "The snow will cover the tire tracks in 2 hours. He kept his voice level, practical. "Now let me check whether you're injured." She closed her eyes. She exhaled. She let go of his wrist. He pulled the flannel shirt back carefully. And then Matthias Holt, who had spent 14 years building walls against the world and had succeeded completely, felt those walls develop a crack he couldn't account for. Because strapped beneath her left arm, held in place by a makeshift harness of electrical tape and canvas webbing, was a leather document wallet, thick, sealed with a metal clasp, and stamped into the clasp, in the embossed letterhead of an agency he recognized on sight, was the seal of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Below the seal, in a field of blue ink that had bled slightly from moisture, was a case number, TBI 2009-147. Matthias sat back on his heels. He knew that number. He had written it on a yellow legal pad on the night of December 3, 2009. Sitting in the parking lot of a Knoxville police precinct, after a detective named Aldous Crane had looked him in the face and told him there was insufficient evidence to proceed with the case. He had written it down because he didn't trust his memory in the state he was in, and he had carried it in his wallet for 3 years before he finally burned it along with everything else that reminded him of what he'd lost. TBI 2009-1147 was the case number for the investigation into the death of his brother. The death that had never been ruled anything other than an accident. Despite what Matthias knew, despite what he had told the detective, despite the 4 months he'd spent trying to make someone in a position of authority care about the fact that Gideon Holt had been murdered and everyone responsible was still walking free. His brother had been a forensic accountant working a contract audit for a company called Strel Meridian Group. Within 3 weeks of turning in his preliminary report, Gideon was dead, his car gone off Ridgeline Road in what the medical examiner called a single vehicle incident in low visibility conditions. Matthias had found the report in Gideon's apartment afterward, tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of a tax code manual. He had taken it to the TBI. He had taken it to the FBI field office. He had taken it to a journalist at the Knoxville paper. Nothing. Strel Meridian had lawyers whose retainer fees probably exceeded the annual budget of the precinct. And then Matthias had come up here because there was nothing left to do that wouldn't get him killed. "Where did you get this?" he said. His voice was not his normal voice. Tatum opened her eyes. She looked at the document wallet in his hands, then up at his face, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or its more complicated cousin. "How do you know what it is?" she said carefully. "Case number," Matthias said. TBI 2009-1147. "I know that case." Tatum went very still. "How?" she said again. "Gideon Holt was my brother." The silence between them had weight. The fire popped in the stove. Outside, the wind had picked up, pushing snow against the single south-facing window in long, hissing sheets. Tatum Voss stared at him. Her face had gone to an expression he couldn't immediately name. Not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. The look of a person who has been running in a very specific direction and has just discovered that the destination already knew she was coming. "I'm a paralegal," she said finally. I've been working for Strel Meridian's outside counsel for 8 months. Contract work, document review. She paused. 2 weeks ago, I was cross-referencing an archived discovery file and I found a folder that shouldn't have been in the digital queue. Someone had misfiled it. It contained internal communications from 2009 between the company's VP of Operations and a man named Doyle Sternig, who the firm used for what the emails called, quote, remediation consulting. Her voice was flat and precise, in the way of someone who has been rehearsing this explanation for days. Sternig isn't a consultant. He runs an off-book security operation out of Chattanooga. 3 of his people have prior convictions for aggravated assault. One of them was deposed in a wrongful death case in 2011 that was settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement. Matthias didn't say anything. The emails, Tatum continued, reference a specific job in December 2009. They reference a name. She looked at him. I don't have to tell you whose name. No, Matthias said. You don't. I copied everything I could onto a drive and I put in my notice the next morning. I told my supervisor it was a family situation. She exhaled slowly. They must have been monitoring the system, because by the time I got home that afternoon, there was a car parked across the street from my building that I'd never seen before. I left through the alley. How long have they been behind you? Since Knoxville. Maybe before. I have a friend in Asheville. I was going to her place. I thought I could get there before. She stopped. The road conditions, yes, Matthias said. He set the document wallet down on the table. His hands were steady. That surprised him slightly. The drive, he said. Is it in there? Inside the front pocket of the wallet, wrapped in a dry bag. He looked at it. 14 years of a specific, contained grief, the kind you build a mountain life around, had just shifted on its foundations, and he was doing the calculations of what came next with the same methodical focus he applied to everything up here. Firewood, water levels, the structural integrity of things that had to hold. My neighbor 4 miles down the mountain has a satellite connection, Matthias said. I can get us a secure upload to the TBI's tip portal. It's not elegant, but encrypted submissions from unknown IP addresses have been successfully used in. There's something else, Tatum said. He looked at her. In the back pocket of the wallet. I almost didn't take it. I probably should have left it. She pressed her good hand flat against her knee, a gesture that looked like self-steadying. But it was Gideon Holtz. His name is on it. And I didn't know who he was to anyone. I just thought someone should have it. Someone who, she stopped. He opened the back pocket. It was a photograph, laminated. A man in his early 30s, standing in front of a mountain overlook, squinting into the sun with the expression of someone who'd been told to smile and was doing his best. On the back, in handwriting that Matthias would have known anywhere, were 7 words, in case anyone ever needs to know. Matthias sat down in the chair beside the stove. He did not cry. He was not built for crying, hadn't been since he was 19, and had learned that grief in the Holt family was a private, structural thing, stored in the walls rather than displayed. But something in his chest did a slow, tectonic shift that he suspected he would be accounting for long after this night. He hid it in the files, Matthias said, in a printed document that was part of the audit deliverable. The last page. Filed under Exhibit K. Tatum was watching him. I think he knew he was in danger. I think he was trying to leave something behind. Matthias held the photograph for a moment longer. Then he set it carefully on the table beside the document wallet. All right, he said. That was all. Just, all right. And then he stood up because there was work to do. And falling apart was a thing that could wait until after. The snow had gotten serious by 8 o'clock. Real mountain snow, dense and wind-driven, piling against the north wall of the cabin with a soft, continuous percussion. Matthias had checked the perimeter twice. His truck was in the shed with the door down. The only light visible from outside was the low amber glow through the curtained south window, which could have been anything. A deer camp. A seasonal rental. Nothing worth investigating on a night like this one. He told himself that. He wasn't certain he believed it. Tatum had eaten canned soup, crackers, dried apples, the kind of food that kept well and tasted like sustenance rather than pleasure, and she had let him wrap her forearm properly. And she had answered his questions with the careful precision of someone who had been going over the same information for days. and had filed it into something she could access cleanly. She was methodical. She was frightened. She was doing a good job of not showing the second thing. You could have gone to law enforcement in Knoxville, Matthias said. He was at the table, going through the document wallet item by item, laying pages out in the firelight. Strel Meridian's senior VP plays golf with the Knox County Sheriff, Tatum said from the couch. State Police. Their general counsel has a former state police captain on retainer. Federal, Matthias said. Yes, Tatum said, that's what the Asheville trip was about. My friend has a contact at the FBI field office in Charlotte. Someone her brother worked with, an agent she says she trusts. She paused. I just had to get there. Matthias nodded slowly. He was looking at one of the printed emails, a chain from November 2009, in which the VP of Operations used the phrase, the accounting situation will be addressed by the end of the quarter, in a way that, read in context, was breathtaking in its candor. This is enough, Matthias said. He wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. This is more than enough. If this gets to the right people in the right condition, with the chain of custody documented. I know, Tatum said. My brother. He stopped. I know, she said again, more quietly. He looked up at her. She was watching him the way people watch someone handle something fragile. Not hovering, not intrusive, just present, available if needed. It occurred to him that he had not been in a room with another person who was paying this quality of attention to him in a very long time. He looked back down at the papers. The sound reached him at 11:14. He knew the exact time because he had glanced at the clock on the mantel approximately 40 seconds before. An old railroad clock, one of the only things he'd brought from his previous life, and he had the specific awareness of it. The sound was an engine. On the fire road, not his neighbor. His neighbor's truck had a diesel knock he could identify at half a mile. This was something else, something that had no reason to be on a fire road that ended at a locked gate, a gate that Matthias had locked himself that morning. He was at the window before Tatum registered what was happening. He cut the lamp. They found us, Tatum said. Not a question. Maybe, Matthias said. Stay down. Through the curtain's edge he could see the tree line lit intermittently by the snow-refracted light of what he calculated were two sets of headlights. They had stopped at the gate. He heard faintly the sound of chain being cut. He moved to the corner where he kept the rifle, a bolt-action .308 he used for deer, kept cleaned, kept loaded with the safety on because he lived alone and had no one to protect from his own carelessness but himself. He checked the action, without thinking about it, the motion as reflexive as breathing. There's a trapdoor in the floor of the back room, he said. Behind the workbench. Drop down into a root cellar. There's a tunnel that exits behind the woodshed. Follow to the end, and you'll come out under the big hemlock. You'll know it by the size. Stay in the trees and move east until you hit the creek, then follow the creek down. My neighbor's house is at the bottom. His name is Preston. There's a light on his porch. I'm not going, Tatum said. He turned. She was standing up. She had the document wallet in her good arm pressed against her chest. Her expression was the one he was starting to recognize. That specific jaw-set quality that said, this is not stubbornness. This is just what I've decided. That evidence goes with me, she said, or it doesn't go anywhere. If I run and something happens to you, no one knows where to look. No one knows the case number, and your brother's file disappears again for another 14 years. She paused. I'm not letting that happen. Matthias looked at her. Outside, the headlights were moving again, coming up the road. Do you know how to shoot? He asked. My grandfather took me hunting every fall until I was 18. He went to the cabinet beside the wood stove and took out the handgun he kept there. A revolver, a .357 he had bought legally and kept maintained out of what he told himself was a general philosophy of preparedness. He held it out to her. She took it with her good arm. She checked the cylinder with the practiced, unhurried motion of someone who had done this before, and he felt something shift in his assessment of her. 3 of them, Matthias said, watching the headlights resolve into a single vehicle that had stopped 50 yards from the cabin. Maybe 4. They're professional, but they're not military. The way they cut the chain tells me they're not used to resistance that knows what it's doing. How can you tell from a chain? A professional cuts the chain and replaces the lock with a similar one so nothing looks disturbed from either direction. These ones just cut it. Tatum absorbed this, so they're not expecting trouble. They're expecting a paralegal and a wrecked truck, Matthias said. They're not expecting me. A voice outside, amplified. A man who had decided that volume was authority. Miss Voss. We know you're in there. We saw the smoke from the road. Come on out with the drive and the documents. And this ends simple. The man who owns this property doesn't need to be involved. Matthias moved to the wall beside the front window. He didn't respond. He wanted them close before he spoke, because proximity changed the calculation in ways he understood and they didn't. He let the silence stretch for 30 seconds. My name is Matthias Holt, he called out, his voice carrying clean and flat through the cabin walls. Gideon Holt was my brother. I have copies of everything in that wallet, and I've already uploaded a full set to a secure federal server. He had not. He had a satellite upload queued on his phone with a neighbor he hadn't called yet. But they didn't know that. A long silence from outside. Then lower. A rapid exchange of voices that he couldn't fully parse. Then the sound of boots on the frozen ground. They were spreading out, flanking, which meant they had decided to stop negotiating. What happened next happened in the specific, compressed way that violence in small spaces always happens. Not dramatically, not cinematically, but in a series of immediate mechanical problems that either get solved or don't. The front window came in with a bar. Matthias had expected the door and was positioned wrong by 3 feet, but he corrected for it. The first man through was large and moved with the economic confidence of someone who had done this before. Matthias took him at the knee with the rifle stock before he'd fully cleared the window frame. The man went down hard. The second man came through the door, which had been kicked rather than broken. A solid door, it took 3 kicks, and he had a weapon up. Tatum shot him, not fatally. The shoulder at a range of 12 feet, in a low-light situation with an unfamiliar revolver, using her non-dominant arm. Matthias would think about this later and understand that under those conditions, a shoulder shot was not bad work. The man dropped his weapon and did not pick it back up outside. Silence. And then the sound of a vehicle starting. One man left and he was going, "The drive," Matthias said immediately. "Does the drive have GPS metadata on the files?" Tatum blinked. I don't know. If they get back to whoever runs their IT, they'll know what was copied, when, and potentially what device. We need that upload done in the next 2 hours, or this gets complicated. He was already pulling out his phone. Come on. The drive to Preston Yaley's property took 11 minutes on roads that would have taken most people 20. Matthias had been driving these roads for 14 years in conditions exactly this bad, and he had the specific, unhurried focus of someone who has had a great deal of practice at doing difficult things under pressure. Preston Yaley was 67 years old, a retired electrical engineer from Oak Ridge who had moved to the mountains because the quiet agreed with the way his mind worked. He answered the door in a robe and did not look particularly surprised to find Theus on his porch at midnight, with a young woman whose arm was in a makeshift sling and a leather wallet, full of what turned out to be the kind of evidence that federal agencies describe, in the careful language of their internal memos, as significant. Preston made coffee. Matthias used the satellite connection. The upload took 40 minutes. During those 40 minutes, Tatum sat at Preston's kitchen table and called a number she had memorized rather than stored, and spoke in a low, even voice to someone at the other end, who asked questions and wrote things down and said, twice, "Stay where you are." 2 FBI agents arrived from the Asheville field office at 4:15 in the morning. They were younger than Matthias expected and older than Tatum expected, and they asked questions in the precise document-oriented way of people who have been trained to build cases rather than win arguments. And Tatum answered them with the same flat precision she had used all night. And Matthias answered his portion and then made himself quiet, because the talking part was largely hers. It was nearly dawn when the agents finally stepped outside to make their calls, and Matthias and Tatum were left alone in Preston's kitchen, with the cold dregs of the coffee and the particular exhausted silence that follows adrenaline at scale. "Your brother left that photograph," Tatum said. She hadn't brought it up again since the cabin. Yes, Matthias said, in case anyone ever needs to know. She looked at her coffee cup. He was thinking about the people who would come after, the people who might need the truth, even if he couldn't give it to them himself. Matthias nodded slowly. I found it, Tatum said. So did you. So does that? She stopped, tried again. Does that mean someone knows now? He thought about it the way he thought about most things these days, honestly, without the softening gloss of comfort. It means the record exists, Matthias said finally, which is the closest thing to knowing that the law can manage. Tatum was quiet for a moment. Then, is that enough? Matthias looked out the window. Above, the sky was doing the specific thing it does in the mountains just before sunrise. Not lightening exactly, but changing quality, shifting from black to the deep, saturated blue that means something is coming. It'll have to be, he said. And then, after a moment, it's more than I had yesterday. Outside, the first pale light was beginning to separate the tree line from the sky, and the snow on the ground caught it and held it. And for the first time in 14 years, the mountain looked to Matthias less like a place he had retreated to, and more like a place he had survived to. He didn't say that out loud. Some things in the mountains stay quiet until they're ready to become something else.